This is the IPS deep dive number 1 on the subject of predictive programming leading up to and foreshadowing the Trump headwound, the assassination attempts, specifically the one in Butler on 7/13/2024 at 6:11 p.m. and 33 seconds. So to begin, I want to define predictive programming, and I'm getting my definition from Autohoaxology 101. Predictive programming is a form of emotional and psychological preparation or conditioning to set one's expectations for pre-planned psychological operations. What I'm pointing out here is that one, what we see in Butler is staged, and two, the sheer volume of psychological conditioning in the form of entertainment should lead us to this conclusion by itself. So I'm going to go through all the examples that I have of what is generally termed predictive programming, but we have a more nuanced take on it here at the Infinite Plane Society think tank, because oftentimes what we see isn't really foreshadowing from months or years before, but sometimes it's concurrent. It's like the day before or the day after. So there's this alignment between entertainment and future staged events, which I'm highlighting, and this would be one such event.
And you know, that's a little bit old, that chart. That chart's a couple of months old. And if you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
This first example is coming from 2010's Machete, and it shows a Senator McLaughlin, played by Robert De Niro, in a Trump-like capacity, speaking about illegal immigration and what he will do to stop it. Interestingly, in Butler, Donald Trump was pointing at a sign that had graphs to show the issue of immigration, and he was crediting the sign with having saved his life because that's why he turned his head. But the speech is xenophobic as Trump's was right when the shooting happens. Let's go ahead and watch this.
The leeches, the parasites are walking away with your money while you're left with the change. So I want to say one more thing. Who are you going to vote for?
Now, it's interesting to note here that in the movie, the senator had actually staged his own assassination attempt in order to boost his re-election campaign. So this is another example of the correlation between the movie and the real event, which is a staged event, which is why they're able to engineer these things so precisely. You'll even note that the shooter gets shot and it looks like his ear. But specifically here, you're looking at a staged assassination that occurs during the speech about illegal immigration. And in Butler, Trump was gesturing at a sign that had the statistics for the number of immigrants coming in and what he was going to do about it. And that's when he was shot. That's exactly what happened in this movie. Not a coincidence. So let us continue. Now here's Donald Trump 84 days later in Butler, Pennsylvania, having a moment of silence at 6:11 p.m. And during this moment of silence, it's interrupted by a male singer performing Ave Maria. Now, I'll explain the significance of that next.
To ask everyone to join me in a moment of silence.
So now we're getting into the area where fictional universes within entertainment overlap with the mainstreamed psyops. So in this case, the shooter, Thomas Crooks, has some interesting connections to the Riddler. Specifically, his resemblance to the Riddler is something we've addressed, But also, the Riddler's name is Edward Nygma, or Enigma. And if you look at the way the media characterized the shooter, the New York Post said, "Why would-be Trump assassin Thomas Crooks remains an infuriating enigma." AP News, Thomas Crooks, after 3 days, remains an enigma. The Onion says he Googled how to be an enigma. So what is being said here? Well, the resemblance is intentional, as you'll see, because there are overlaps between the fictional universes, which are propaganda vectors, that's what they use these movies for, and the future fake news events. And they use these characters in order to filter how we interpret them. They want you to be sympathetic to the shooter, for example, or that could be in the example here, it would make sense that you would have the characterization put in advance, so you might see him in a certain light as an anti-hero, perhaps. But interestingly, when Batman confronts him and asks him, "What did you do?" and he bangs on the glass, the Riddler sings Ave Maria, the exact song played during the moment of silence. Okay, here it's interesting to note that Doug Mills, veteran photographer for the New York Times, took the photograph of the bullet whizzing by Trump's ear, but he's also the one who took the photo of the Secret Service agent whispering into George W. Bush's ear on 9/11. So it's notable that you have some overlapping participants in high-profile psyops. A similar comparison can be made with Richard Drew, who photographed both RFK's death and the 9/11 falling man. Days before the shooting, Thine Ears Shall Bleed was made available to all the streaming platforms, and the movie poster and the cover had a very grotesque image of a bleeding ear with somebody having kind of reddish, blondish hair. But this came out just days before Thine Ears Shall Bleed on digital platforms. There's many layers to the symbolism, and we could go any number of directions with this, but I want to stick with the most basic. The iconic photo of Trump fist pumping the air with the flag behind him and a Secret Service agent at his back. That picture is a recreation of the cover of Braveheart. And if you look at the face paint on Mel Gibson's character, you'll note that the American flag is positioned in such a way, and it also matches Trump's social media avatar, to where the face paint and the colors on the flag actually line up with Trump's position. You might also note, and this is what I mean by layers of subtext, that there's an obvious 9/11 on Trump's face. There's even 9 stars on the blue section. You might also take note of Mel Gibson's standing in the MAGA community, the QAnon community. He's a significant player in that story, so that's another level to it. But when he returned to Butler, the New York Post put out a cover with Trump, and it says, Braveheart. The previous coverage they gave after he was shot was the image of him raising his fist. This next one is from a teaser trailer released a day before the shooting, and this is for Captain America Brave New World, which comes out in 2025. In it, Harrison Ford, as president, is shot at and survives the assassination attempt, which is in a theater, which might have some significance. Harrison Ford Theater, Lincoln, and also Harrison Ford's birthday, 7/13, the day of the shooting, and also the birthday of Julius Caesar, which, as you'll see, ties into this broader story.
The trailer for Captain America Brave New World just debuted a few weeks ago, and well, it's already been updated, so the trailer that's going to start playing in theaters removes the assassination attempt against the president. I told you so.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, Thaddeus Ross.
Here's a clip from Inside Edition about the play Julius Caesar, where it's obviously based on Trump and he's getting killed. This takes place in Central Park. It's also interesting to note this connection between Trump and Caesar extends to the recent movie Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis, where the main character has some Trump overlap and survives an assassination attempt, as we will get to. But let's watch this clip, and it just shows you how far back the conditioning for this event with Trump goes.
It's an actor dressed to look just like President Donald Trump as he's assassinated on stage. Look as his character is stabbed to death. And there's no mistaking the Trump connection. Check out the unbuttoned overcoat and red tie that hangs over his waist. It's a staging of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar that is outraging many. The controversial production is taking place here in New York City's Central Park. The staging is being seen as a direct jab at Trump and the controversial political climate in this country. There are other similarities to Trump. Caesar's wife, Calpurnia, bears a resemblance to First Lady Melania.
Big hands for me!
This is how the assassination scene has usually been done. Julius Caesar repeatedly stabbed by the members of the Roman Senate. In the new version, you see a bloodied Caesar, his white dress shirt soaked in blood. There was mixed reaction about this new twist.
I didn't like that they made this person who looks like Trump get assassinated. It's not a good message.
I don't think it's disrespectful for the president to be murdered on stage. It's not really the president.
Long before the event in Butler, many had noted Donald Trump's resemblance to the Illuminati playing card "Enough is Enough," which says, "Anytime, any place, our snipers can drop you. Have a nice day." And the phrase "enough is enough" was invoked by Hulk Hogan at the RNC. Quote, "When they tried to kill the next president of the United States, I said, enough is enough." Now, this is significant, I believe, for a couple of reasons. Namely, that they're both Hall of Famers in the WWE. And many thought that Trump maybe had cut his own ear, a technique in wrestling which they call blading. And when Hogan gave his speech, he said he suddenly recalled an image of Donald Trump in the audience looking up at him at Hulkamania when he was bleeding on his face. And he said that looking at Trump on the screen, bleeding on his face, he said it recalled that, but now their roles were reversed. And I thought that could be a sly nod to the fact that Hogan would be in the know about the blading technique. And it was kind of a Hall of Famer to Hall of Famer nod. And Trump did blow a kiss at him at that moment, which I thought was telling. In January, The Atlantic released an article called "The Great Normalization." And this was highlighted by Laura Loomer and other influencers as a threat to Trump because it has a bullet hole through glass and a hand holding $47. And it's put out by Alex Soros, the son of George Soros. So maybe you think that's tenuous, maybe, but this was back in January. Following this, The Atlantic released an article about the Supreme Court and what Trump is doing to it, and it has a silhouette of the justices with the red curtain, and it looks like blood dripping down Trump's head, on the right side, no less. But specifically, the part of his ear that he reported having been damaged or lost was the part where the red coloring clipped off. So that's very specific predictive programming in the same publication months before the event. Here's another example of predictive programming, and this is coming from the magazine Time. And again, Laura Loomer comments on this one. Did they have advanced knowledge of the attempted assassination of Donald Trump? So on 9/11/2024, the Time magazine released a cover with Trump in a sand pit on a golf course, and it says, "In trouble." Well, this was right before the attempted assassination by Ryan Routh on the golf course. So this is just yet another example in magazine covers. On November the 6th, 2024, the day after the election, The Atlantic published Trump Won, Now What? The United States is about to become a different type of country. But Trump won, now what? And if you look at the artwork, it's hard to describe it as anything other than a headshot with blood dripping down the right side of Trump's head. This next example is from Fallout, directed by Jonathan Nolan, brother of Christopher Nolan, who does the Batman fictional universe. And these are fictional universes that overlap with fake news. This is what I'm talking about with predictive programming and entertainment being used to carry certain messages. Well, in this episode of Fallout, you have a character who I would suggest corresponds likely to Kamala Harris, Betty Pearson, who orchestrates this coup of a sort. And after cleaning up the evidence of their crimes and the deaths, and they clean up all the blood, they go back to this room, and the character who knew of all of the atrocity is looking around, and there's no trace that anything happened, except for one drop of blood on the right side of the head of a foosball character that looks just like Donald Trump. Now, this came out before, so let's take a look.
Votes 31, 32, and 33. 3 democracies and 3...
So I think now would be a good time to go back and look at the clips from 1958's episode of Trackdown, End of the World, one of the earliest examples of predictive programming involving Donald Trump in his present capacity. He convinces the people in the town to build a wall and that they had to be protected from cosmic threats. So here you have Trump with Build the Wall and Space Force kind of built into the story. And this was noted back in 2016. But the episode also features Trump getting arrested, which didn't happen until 2024. So the prophetic value of this piece of predictive programming hadn't even been entirely realized when people first noted how much it connected. So let's watch those clips.
Got a name?
Trump.
That fits. I bring you a message. A message of great importance. Without my help and knowledge, every one of you will be dead.
Sheriff, how long are you going to put up with this?
What do you mean?
How long are you going to let this con man walk around town?
Be careful, son. I can sue you.
How about it, Sheriff? When are you going to put the lid on?
What for?
Well, stealing is stealing, whether you do it with a gun or a mouthful of mealy words.
I don't intend to sit here and be insulted, Sheriff. If your people don't want my help, I can go elsewhere.
Wait a minute, Mr. Trump. You don't talk for the rest of us.
Since the sheriff wouldn't stop Trump, Hobie had to find somebody who would. Sheriff Chet Farrow was the gun law in Talpa, and Judge Clement was the book law.
You hear about Trump?
Yes, sir. What are you going to do about him?
What do you want me to do?
Stop him.
From what?
From taking the town.
Can you prove that that's what he has in mind?
Well, it's obvious.
But can you prove it? In order to arrest him, the sheriff has to have a charge. And Trump hasn't given him a thing to go on.
Well, there's got to be some way to stop him.
Well, if there is, I don't know it. It's a funny thing.
Sir?
When we were kids, we were all afraid of the dark. And we grew up, and we weren't afraid anymore, but it's funny how a big lie can make us all kids again.
Hobie had checked the town. The people were ready to believe. Like sheep, they ran toward the slaughterhouse. And waiting for them was the high priest of fraud.
I am the only one. Just me. I can build a wall around your homes that nothing will penetrate.
What do we do? How do we save ourselves?
You ask, how do you build that wall? You ask, and I'm here to tell you.
You're a liar, Trump. Aren't you going to stay for the fireworks?
I've done all I can for Talpa.
Figure it's time for me to be moving on. Well, I think you ought to wait.
It's where you and I disagree.
You're under arrest, Trump. What charge? Well, you write it any way you like. Grand theft, fraud, I think a jury will find it stealing.
When Trump put the 45 on the side of his hat, I took this to mean that there's going to be some kind of event that involves this head wound, and it was consistent with much of what we were already examining. And I remembered that he put up this shot glass for sale, and I thought, that's strange. He doesn't drink or smoke. He's a teetotaler, but he's got a shot glass at his wine and whiskey bar that has his signature. It says Trump 45, and it has a bullet in the side of the glass. And this got me to think about the idea that Stanley Kubrick directed the JFK hoaxed assassination. And under this presumption that that was hoaxed, it's interesting to look at Kubrick's other work, such as Full Metal Jacket, where the character Joker is based on JFK, and he has a target on the side of his head where Kennedy was shot. Joker, played by Matthew Modine, again, is representing JFK in a subtext in a movie that has multiple references to Lee Harvey Oswald. And I'm suggesting here that the 45 on the Trump's hat, the 45 on the shot glass, that this is foreshadowing, but specifically the 45-47 is like Kubrick's signature. And there's another event that happened on 4/7, or rather 4th of July, at a parade, where the shooter had 47 tattooed on the side of his head and was obsessed with Lee Harvey Oswald. So we'll get into that here. But I also want to mention that the 8th episode of season 4 of Stranger Things is the one where Matthew Modine, the Joker from Full Metal Jacket, is assassinated or shot. There's a lot of connections here, but the reoccurring themes are pretty clear and they stand out. So I'm suggesting that the number on the side of the head is a clue. And he added the 47 to it. So it was 45-47, which breaks to 9/11. I mean, these things are interconnected. I'm trying not to get too far into the weeds here, but I want to point out what I see as some kind of a signature, like a plot device, and a bit of foreshadowing. And I would say it has kind of borne out. So let's look at Robert Crimo next. So July 4th, 2022, at a 4th of July parade, Robert Crimo sniped a number of people and was then caught hours later after a manhunt. If you note, he has a number 47 fetish. He's got the number tattooed on the side of his head. He had it painted on his car. And on his wall, he's pictured with an image of Lee Harvey Oswald. Funnily enough, his mother was photographed carrying a Target bag, which I think might be some kind of a joke. You know, Oswald, the Target, the 47. I think this is all connected. And it gets even deeper. So this is when Lee Harvey Oswald started to really make himself present on the world stage, which further led to this notion that Trump was going to get it. And this was 2 years ago when we were talking about this. So let's look deeper into the Robert Crimo story. Highland Park shooting person of interest Robert Crimo went to Trump rally dressed as Where's Waldo? And after the shooting, there's a manhunt. So it's like, where's Waldo? And then he's obsessed with Lee Harvey Oswald. There's the newspaper on his wall, Oswald slain in jail shift. So at the time I said, where's Oswaldo? And there are further connections. You know, the 47s are there. There's a very popular video game called Hitman Agent 47. But when this happened, I said, Lee Harvey Oswald has stepped onto the world stage. And I could do a separate deep dive on all the instances of Lee Harvey Oswald inserted into our daily news narratives in strange ways. I mean, for example, in addition to this, kind of somewhat unrelated but connected, Brock Purdy, the Super Bowl quarterback for the 49ers, was compared to Lee Harvey Oswald. And I thought, why are they even invoking that name? Well, I think it's because they like to put things into your frame of reference. And in this case, Lee Harvey Oswald had made his appearance on the world stage, and he hasn't left. And this was in July of 2022. Here's a review from the Amazon series The Boys, released on July 11th, 2 days before the Trump shooting. The Boys recap, Lee Harvey Oswald. And this is in reference to the episode, season 4, episode 7. And there were references to Oswald, Dealey Plaza, and a plot to kill the president. Now, the season finale went further with this storyline, so much so with Assassination Run as the original title, and they had to change it, as you'll hear.
The Season 4 finale, which was written more than a year ago and originally titled Assassination Run, has now been renamed by Amazon following the recent assassination attempt on Donald Trump. The title has now been simply changed to Season 4 Finale, and a viewer discretion warning has been added before the episode.
As it says here, the potential assassination didn't work, and it describes the reason why, but it was an attempted assassination. That's the whole point. And it says, however, coincidences happen. The Boys has been known for its direct satire of the Trump era, with the Homelander as its central parody of the man himself. And it goes on to say that they had been building to an assassination attempt on the President of the United States. And that's the finale, which we'll look at a reference to here. The Boys, Season 4, Episode 8, Assassination Run. And if you look at the articles around this story, it had an image of the Homelander, the Trump character, who had blood all over his face for something he had just done. And in that same episode, 4/7, he was looking at NFTs of himself because, again, this is a Trump parody. And he looks at one and then he smashes the glass. So it looks like a bullet hole. And if you look at that image of the Homelander's NFT, he has the sky behind him. You're looking up at an angle. The American flag is right there. And then there's a man with dark sunglasses on the far left side. And then you can see the Washington Monument. Now, look at how this corresponds to the Trump photo, where he has his fist raised, the man in the dark glasses behind him, and the flagstaff and the flag, the sky. It's practically the same photograph. Now, this was Season 4, Episode 7. So this was right before the event in Butler. This is a headline from Rolling Stone. Homelander was always meant to be Trump. Sort of like Biff Tannen was meant to be Trump. One of the points I'm making here is that Trump pre-existed Trump. The template for this character, the role was already there, and he's just filling in those shoes. So the Homelander's resemblance to Trump is not unintentional, and there are many other characters in that show. For example, Firecrackers, Marjorie Taylor Greene. So this is not a new thing, but the timing of the storylines overlapping and the fact that it's commented on, that it's noted on, they put a warning label on the episode because of it. This underscores my point. This is a deliberate entrainment. These are not coincidences. It's not the result of a simulation. These are examples of covert propaganda, which are meant to steer us in a certain direction. It's perception management. And this is just one example. So let's look at a couple more.
But it must be reiterated that these are fictitious events that can be traced back to the comic book source material, with no deliberate correlation to recent events.
Many celebrities took part in the ritual sacrificing of Trump. They've been killing him for a long time. You got Kathy Griffin chopping his head off. You got Snoop Dogg shooting him. This is not a new thing. And this particular deep dive is not going to go into every single instance of this image they've been building. But I'm going at ones that are really specific to Butler and this ongoing theme of an attempted assassination. So let's continue. This is from Batman Caped Crusader, which was released shortly after the shooting in Butler, and its season finale, has Rupert Thorne, a villain, a Trump-esque character, having his ear cut by Batman, who throws a boomerang at him, and it's a warning for what's going to happen next season. As he sits in his chair, Batman flies into the room, slicing Thorne's ear before it becomes embedded into the chair. So let's watch that clip, and then I have a little more to add on to this particular narrative and how it connects to Trump.
Just tell them to keep their mouths shut, and my lawyers will take care of everything.
Oh! Rupert Thorne was celebrating his victory over the former Gotham District Attorney, Harvey Dent. That's why he had his ear cut. There was a warning for what's going to happen next, but he was actually talking about Harvey Dent. And this also recalls Donald Trump, like Batman, kind of a pun, a visual pun, holding a bat. And he poses next to Alvin Bragg, the DA. So this is another example of the overlapping with the fictional universes. No coincidences. Remember, Trump was on trial 4/4/2023, and Joker 2 was being filmed outside the courthouse, and people thought the mob was there for Trump. No, they were actors there for the Joker. So this merging of real and fake is constant. But that's just another example in children's programming. Let's look at the next one. At the end of the first season of The Sopranos, Tony Soprano survives an assassination attempt where his ear is shot. And the very next episode, he's confronted by somebody who holds a rifle to him. So these are some interesting connections that tie into The Sopranos. And it's notable that at the time Trump was having his conflict with Alvin Bragg, he was called a mobster. He was described as using intimidation tactics. So the mafia mobster aspects of Trump were being highlighted. So that might be another connection here to Tony Soprano, who did again survive this assassination attempt, as you can see here.
Not the boss. You know that you've been running things behind.
There is a dead Trump in Beetlejuice. He even has a lapel pin on his gold suit. Interestingly, this is the sequel, Beetlejuice. Same time that Joker 2 comes out. And Beetlejuice is a Joker-esque archetype. And like the Joker, he's got green hair. So at the time, I was noticing these connections, and I was thinking, this must be Trump. This must be Trump, and this came out just shortly after the shooting. But the fact that he's in the underworld in his gold suit with the lapel pin, definitively him, and the hair is unmistakable. But it also fits in with this connection with this shooter archetype represented as some kind of a Joker.
Did that line used to work for you?
I'm not dead! Well, you know what? My husband's here. Charles Dietz. Yes, he can fix us. You call him. He can fix us. He can fix anything.
Not anymore. He can't.
There was a show on Netflix called A Man in Full from a Tom Wolfe novel from 1998. Now, this is interesting for a few reasons. I watched the whole season. I knew it was Trump before I found reviews that were making these comparisons. But beyond just Charlie Coker being repurposed to be Trump, consider 1998 being the time it was published. This Netflix show, based on a 98 book, is representing 2024 Trump, like real time. So it's sort of like with Machete, how the role that was forecasting this event was a version of Trump that didn't even exist at the time that the content was created. Additionally, Baron Trump is obviously one of the characters. You got Melania, you got Ivanka, and grotesquely, the character who represents Ivanka is the wife of the Trump character. Additionally, there's an Obama character who is the Chicago mayor and the orchestrator of Charlie Coker's downfall. Now, I'm bringing this up because you have this story about a real estate magnate's fall from grace and how he's being taken out by this certain individual. So you're watching this whole story unfold, and it's going along with Trump on trial. So this constituted concurrent programming for a man in Fool. And at the end of this movie series, he dies. And that's one of my points. In fact, that reminds me of another movie I need to add in here, Civil War, where the president is obviously Trump. And at the end, the whole movie is about killing Trump. So this is just a reoccurring theme. But again, the mayor is an Obama representative, which is very interesting because he's a mayor. Where in Megalopolis, which I'll reference here in a moment, it is the mayor who organizes the assassination attempt of the Trump character. Another reoccurring theme. So let's look at the next example.
I would have seen it as maybe the start of a journey that he would have been going on. But with him ultimately dying at the end, he died fighting over the very thing that he was so stressed about: money and power.
Biff Tannen. Biff Tannen from Back to the Future is designed off of Trump. It is based on Trump. It is Donald Trump. We have President Biff Tannen, as Michael J. Fox said, and Biff Tannen expires, as you'll see here. Francis Ford Coppola, Megalopolis, has a character, the character Caesar, who I believe is basically Trump. Although, interestingly, you have a visual correlation of Trump in the character played by Jon Voight, who said that he was not based on Trump. He insisted he wasn't. And that character had a golden statue of himself. So you see this visual representative of Trump as an emperor. But the main character, Caesar, stands in for Trump in Megalopolis, which is Megalopolis. Make Rome great again. Megalon. It's all based on MAGA. And Francis Ford Coppola said, America will end up with an emperor in a few months. My films are prescient. And when he says his films are prescient, it's because Coppola is a meta-scripter. He's in on this. He's one of the insiders. But here you see the character, who, again, relates to Trump, having survived an assassination attempt, his right eye bandaged. And again, he's associated with MAGA, Make Rome Great Again. And this is just scratching the surface. But let's continue. In May of 2024, then former President Donald Trump spoke at the Reagan-Lincoln dinner. And at one point, he remarked on how everything was going too far left, and he made a joke because his podium had rocked to the left. Well, when it rocked to the left and he leaned over, this was noted by someone in our Gilded server, Synchromorpheus. It looked like blood coming out of his head, like he had taken a shot while standing at the podium. Interesting connection here. Could that be predictive? Well, it certainly could be easy to fake such a thing, a photo op. If you look at January 13th, it was a lot of coordinated photographs, highly coordinated. And obviously the bullet would have been inserted after the event. It would not have been a real bullet. And that photograph would have been impossible. But take a look at Trump clowning around at the podium.
Terrible. But Americans are not struggling. You know, this is the worst platform. Who put this stage up here? This is the worst. The frickin' place is falling down.
So here's Trump 2 weeks after the top of his ear was shot off, and he had that massively oversized bandage, and he's perfectly healed. It's a miracle. And there are many theories about what happened that day: second shooters, deep state, inside job. The only logical conclusion is that it was staged and that nobody died, not even the firemen. Nobody was tricked. The Secret Service would necessarily have been in on it. And I've often pointed out how Trump may have gone through a McDonald's drive-thru on the way there for some ketchup packets. You know, he had the Secret Service take him through there so that he could squirt it on the side of his head. And I said that facetiously. But interestingly enough, 2 months before his assassination, JFK and Jackie Kennedy were filming a home movie while they were on vacation where they simulated his assassination, covered him in Heinz 57 ketchup, and the Secret Service were involved. So the idea here I'm suggesting is that this was a theatrical performance. This was a psyop. Nobody died. So even those calling it fake who think somebody died are never going to get the full picture. And the presence of so much predictive programming, concurrent programming, the repetition of it all, leading to a foregone conclusion. Because remember, even up to that event for months, all of the far right pundits were saying Trump's going to get it. They're going to take him out. So they built up a chorus so nobody seemed surprised when it, quote, happened. My contention here is that predictive programming is essentially a form of advertising, but instead of selling you products, they're getting you to acquiesce to certain narratives or agree with certain storylines or just find certain things that are impossible suddenly plausible. They make things that would not be in your frame of reference seem like they're the next solution or the next logical choice. So I think it's all manipulation. There's no meaningful distinction between news and Hollywood, and Trump performed a magnificent magic trick on 7/13/2024. This has been the IPS Deep Dive #1. Thank you for subscribing, and we'll be working on subsequent releases here very soon.